So, welcome everyone. Good morning to most. Good evening and afternoon to a few others. What I wanted to talk about, and Dean and Chris are always hard to follow, so bear with me. But what I wanted to talk about is customer centricity in the term that we typically use as global outsourcing. And just to be clear, what we're talking about is Indian talent working with companies outside Indian borders, mostly Western companies and so forth. How do we start to apply customer centricity, and why do we need to, first of all? So thank you for joining. My name is Dwayne Stroman. I am a SAFE program consultant trainer with Cyberbond Training Advisory Services. What I really want to talk, as I was saying, I've been working in the lean agile field and early on, without even knowing I was doing so, since about 2002. And a good part of my career, I've worked again with a lot of offshore, not only Indian talent, but in South America, in parts of Eastern Europe, and so forth. And what I've come to discover is there is a problem that still exists. It's been around for a long time, and it's quite frustrating. And with Scaled Agile 5.0, it really put a face and a name to the problem, and its lack of customer centricity. Now, as I talk through this, I want to ask your forbearance because I am going to touch on some cultural, some possibly sensitive issues. Bear with me, I'm simply adding light to these so that we can start to improve, and I mean absolutely no offense. So bear with me if I do tread a little bit on some of the cultural issues. So what is customer centricity? Amazon, whether you're a fan of Amazon or not, it's hard to deny that they are a customer-centric company. This quote from Jeff Bezos, our goal is to be Earth's most customer-centric company. And is it working? I think so. If you take a look at year-over-year value for Amazon, for their enterprise valuation, 951 billion this time last year, big company. This year, $1.54 trillion. That is a huge increase for an already extremely large company. So how are they doing it? Here's one of their secrets. I love this concept. Within Amazon, they have, in any Amazon event, especially at conference meetings and so forth, where Jeff is there, there's an empty seat at the table, usually at the head of the table. There's a name tag there that says customer. And that's because they want it very clear that the customer is always there. Even if there's not a physical body there, that the customer is there. To me, that's where customer centricity starts for them. Because again, customer centricity is a mindset, and they bake in that mindset with practices like that by having the empty chair, by having those types of practices that really bring the customer to the forefront. So let's talk about customer centricity, especially from a Scaled Agile perspective. So what is it? Well, Scaled Agile defines it as a mindset, a way of doing business that really focuses on creating positive experiences for the customer. Doing that through a full set of products and services. Now, there's key components to that, focusing on the customer, that customer-centric, focusing on key segments, key areas that customers value. For example, Amazon does not treat their AWS customers the way they treat their marketplace customers. They understand the different customer personas, the different customer needs in those different market segments. Understanding their needs, again, moving beyond just listening. It's not just listening to the customer, it's understanding what do they actually need. It's diving in to see, okay, I hear you, but do I also see? Do I also understand deeply beyond just what your words are saying? Thinking and feeling like the customer. So pulling in tools between customer centricity and design thinking, such as personas, empathy mapping, things like that, that really help them to feel what the customer is feeling and understand what they're going through. And then building whole product solutions. Dean brought up a great example of that. Okay, so he's got insurance, he thinks, but how can he find where it is? That's not a whole product solution. That is not an end-to-end, I'm focused on the customer type of solution. And then finally, knowing customer lifetime value. I have always viewed that a lifelong customer is worth far more than gathering new customers. That faithful, loyal customer that sticks with you for a reason because you continue to focus on them. You continue to deliver value directly for them. But we have a problem. That's customer centricity, but in many cases in global outsourcing and just in that approach of working across boundaries, we're missing the target. There's a lot of issues with that. So I interviewed a client I've worked with at a couple of different large enterprises in the past. She's become a good friend of mine. And I just talked to her and asked her, so what are your thoughts on global outsourcing? And her first comment, very clearly stated, was the best way to do outsourcing, don't do it. I would get rid of it if I possibly could. As a enterprise delivering a product to a customer, that's not the perspective I want my customer to have. I don't want my customer to be thinking that they really are only using us because they have to. That's not a good situation to be in. Let's talk about a few of the problems that we see. Now, this is a really good top 10 list of issues with outsourcing, and the number one problem was post-contract processes and decision rights, not understood. And basically, having that after we've signed the documents, after we've agreed to start moving forward, the communication, the collaboration, the decision-making being delayed and slowed down is negatively affecting the customer in a great deal. And they're really struggling with that. It's a lot of pain points, causing a lot of issues. Here's another one that's really near and dear to my heart in not a good way, is what I call the shell game. And again, I'm pulling out a lot of issues that we see from a business model approach, but we see this quite often where we're working with outsourced company and really what we want is the talent. We want the skill set, we want the capability, but because of the business model behind it, we tend to see people being shifted back and forth, moving from project to project and so forth. For example, working with a really large electronics retailer here in the United States, we had 3 major outsourcing partners working with us and trying to create true teams that could go through the Tuckman model, forming, storming, norming, performing, that would retain that knowledge, retain that esprit de corps, really create a true agile team. Was a great struggle because we would come in one morning and realize that one of the people that we relied on that had really ingratiated themselves into our team was on a different project, was no longer available, was working with something else. And that brought about a lot of issues, a lot of consternation. We were able to work through those issues in other ways I'll talk about later, but that's one of the key problems that we see. So in my opinion, it's time to check the engine to see what's going on. What's the underlying problem? What's really our issue? Working with another SPCT, John Miller, he relayed a really important story that was similar to the experiences I've seen. And he talked about this US media company. Now, this company was working with both offshore and onshore teams, some teams in the US, some full teams in India, and they wanted to do an experiment. So without telling leadership, they had both a team in India and a team in the US deliver the exact same project, the exact same effort. The US team delivered it in 2 weeks, the India team in 7 weeks, and the quality suffered. Was there a talent difference? Absolutely not. Skilled people on both sides, high levels of talent, high levels of passion, engagement. That wasn't the problem. It was the underlying model that was being used. It was the lack of customer centricity around the organizational process, that diving in and really focusing on the customer first. Some of the key problems that we see here and see all the time, and working with my Cyberbond partners, hearing some of the issues there, is when we have directors that are handling multiple customers, they have whip overloads, they really struggle with being able to provide that true customer-centric approach because their targets are about productivity. And one of the things I like to teach my students is that we improve productivity by not focusing on productivity. We look away, we look at lean flow, we look at network operating systems. And productivity takes care of itself. Productivity is improved by not focusing on improving productivity. And so a lot of the concepts that we want to create, and that I know a lot of your customers are trying to build into their organizations, lean agile practices, lean agile thinking, are really struggling because of that lack of customer centricity approach. So it's time for a pivot. It's time to adjust. It's time to start to determine how to move the needle forward, how to start moving forward. And all of you being here today, I'm going to assume that you're all aware of this. We saw some really good information this morning from both Dean and Chris about how strong SAFE is in the marketplace, how heavily it's considered. When I work with clients, they have either considered SAFE, are implementing SAFE, or are far down the road with the SAFE journey. And so this is really becoming the de facto standard for how we implement lean and agile thinking, lean and agile principles across large enterprises. So if you're going to apply customer centricity, it's going to require that you start to work within that SAFE construct, within that organizational approach. And here's one thing I think is really powerful, is when I look at the scaled agile big picture, one thing jumps out at me. All of the roles, artifacts, processes that you see there are really there for one reason, one key reason, and that's to make those agile teams successful. They're the ones delivering the value. They're the ones actually solving the problems. The rest of the organization is creating that strategy of the problems we need solved. They're creating the validation of, are we solving the problem correctly? Are we solving the right problem? They're creating that lean governance, that strategy investment funding, all those critical aspects that come to play from really the heavy lean side of the house. That's a key component of what they're doing, is supporting those agile teams. So if that's what they're doing, supporting the agile teams, how can you join in? Well, you can join the network operating system. You can work with your clients, start to help your clients to experience scaled agile from a true network operating system. As Dean talked about this morning, we're not saying throw away the hierarchy. Hierarchy has its benefits. Bureaucracy has its benefits. There are processes and practices in place for a reason, to protect the organization. It's really that continuing to keep the system moving forward. But to truly innovate and to truly deliver value, we need to work in that network operating system. And one of the struggles is, from an outsourcing model, we haven't really moved heavily to that yet. We talk about it. We talk about teams and people being part of scaled agile implementations. But when the rubber hits the road, when the reality hits, from the experience I have seen, is that we struggle trying to really ingratiate it, really work into the network operating system. And the problem is on both sides. Let's keep that in mind. This is not a India problem. This is not a Western Europe problem. It's not a US problem. It's on both sides, because we fail to recognize the importance of this valuable talent coming from India, joining the network operating system within our clients. So here's one of the key things that we need. We need more than just warm bodies. Customers are telling me over and over again, that client I mentioned, that is not an exception, that's the norm. We need more than warm bodies and seats. We need people with brain power. We need them to be engaged. Now, when you think back to where a lot of this came from, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Taylorism, or the principles of scientific management implemented by Frederick Winslow Taylor. A lot of that brought about the command and control structure, the work breakdown structure, things that when Taylor was operating in the early 1900s really benefited the enterprises at the time. We have to remind those organizations, those enterprises were working in a very complicated world, not a complex world, in a complicated world. We live in an extremely complex world today with all the variables. No one could have predicted COVID. No one could have predicted the banking collapse that Dean was talking about, all those different issues. We don't have complexity anymore. We don't have complicated anymore. We have complexity. And we need that brain power. We need that talent to not just do projects, not just deliver tasks, but to really engage, to be part of that network operating system. Another issue we have is not every answer should be yes. We want that engagement. We want that. Are you sure you want to do that? Is that really the solution you think will benefit your customers the most? I want to tell you another story. Now, working with South American offshore, I was working with a company where I was a software director, director of software development. And at one point, we started working with a group in Chile, Santiago de Chile, small group, 5 people. We had high hopes for that effort. We thought it was going to be very successful. However, what we were getting back for quality and really usability was really poor. We looked at the problem and said, this is not a talent problem. What's going on? And so, side funny story, my manager came into my office one night and said, how would you like to move to Chile for a while? And I said, yes. So going down to Chile, the first thing I learned is the passion, the engagement, the talent level that was there. And the second thing I learned was the problem was we were handing them documents and they were expected to say yes. Okay, we have the document, we will start to implement it. Because the conversations they brought up with me were, why would you want to do it that way? Have you thought about doing it this way? Have you thought about this approach? Now that may be the way it works in the US, but it's not the way it works in South America. And in fact, we're working with a lot of East Asian companies, and it's not the way it works there either, where they have different paradigms, different cultural aspects, and so on. So are you sure you want to build it that way? The answer was no, but no one's ever asked us that before. No one's ever challenged us on that. So understanding the value of challenging that. And I was learning a lot about, I'm going to talk a little bit about culture in a bit, but about the different cultural aspects is that sometimes it makes it different from culture to culture. It makes it difficult from culture to do that. And I'm here to tell you right now, from a US company perspective especially, we want that. We want to hear no once in a while. We want to hear, are you sure that's the way you want to do it? The reason I'm showing these safe core values here is those no's are sometimes critical to providing alignment, transparency, built-in quality, program execution. We have to hear no quite often. In fact, I like to teach that one of the most valuable words in a lean agile leader's toolkit is no. No, not yet. No, that's not the right solution. No, but let's look deeper. Maybe we can find a better solution to that. So keep that in mind. We don't want yes every time. We want that conversation. We want that engagement. Let's talk about culture. A lot of times it's a sensitive issue. In fact, one of my favorite definitions of culture is all those things we don't like to talk about. All those things in the policies, the practices, the way we work together, all those things in the system that we don't like to talk about. We need to start talking about those from both sides. For example, US versus India, low versus high context culture. Very different approaches to things. It doesn't mean that we have to change our culture. It just means we have to learn more about cultural concepts such as low versus high context. And really, high context cultures, those are the ones, they communicate relying heavily on context. I need to know the environment. I need to know the situation. I need to know what the expectations are. That's a high context culture. A low context culture is more relying on just explicit verbal communication, more direction, more approach. Neither one is necessarily good or bad, they just are. But understanding the differences between those two is absolutely critical. In fact, the study that I brought up earlier, where they came up with the 10 key issues with dealing with outsourcing and working with outsourcing, number 9 was culture clash between the client and service provider. I know working with organizations in the past, that is one of the things that we've addressed head on. Now we have to do it with sensitivity, obviously, from both sides, because cultures are important to both sides of us. Now, if we be honest, when you talk about US culture, we're infants compared to Indian culture. Indian culture is what, 3,000 years old? A lot of legacy, a lot of tradition, a lot more history behind it. We have a very, very infantile culture. They're both important though. Now, one of the things that I've learned in my career, and giving you a specific example, working with, again, another large retailer here in the US, is we would get on calls with the talent, the people we were working with in India, and we would ask a question. And we would hear what we call crickets. We don't hear anything, no response. Or we would hear, yeah, that sounds good. Okay, yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. We knew that that wasn't really the right answer. In fact, we were challenging them to come back to us with, but is that the right answer? We're not telling you, we're asking you, is that the right approach? And we still heard the same thing. Yes, yes, that's the right approach. So we took a different tact. We stepped back and instead we said, let's get to know each other. And so in our daily stand-ups, in our iteration planning meetings, whenever we had communication, the first thing we would do is spend a few minutes asking each other across the phone, hey, what did you do this weekend? What do you do for fun? What cricket, that's a interesting sport. I don't know anything about it. How is it played? So what's your favorite food? Boy, I love Indian food here in the US. Tell me, is this really similar to real Indian food? Just asking questions back and forth, learning about personal lives, about how life works in India, and then also sharing how life works in the US. Within a week, those same calls, we could not shut the people on the other end of the phone up. We would ask a question and get so much information, we would have to finally time box it and say, this is incredible. Okay, we have to condense this. We have to bring this together. Those simple little things can bring about so much power, so much energy in that relationship. It's absolutely vital that we recognize those cultural differences. So a lot of you are familiar with this slide, the famous Captain David Marquet submarine video, where he talks about decentralized decision making. Now, a little background behind it. A good friend of mine is a just recently retired US Navy commander. And I asked him about Marquet and his approach and if it's still advocated and done in the US Navy. And at first he said, David, who? And then I described the decentralized approach used on the submarines. He said, oh, absolutely. In fact, he said the last 2 years of my career, my job was teaching up and coming leaders and teaching them about decentralization and that intrinsic motivation approach, principles 8 and 9 from Scaled Agile. He told me something really interesting. He said, but here's what happens. On a submarine, you need a 4-year degree. You need to be an engineer. You need to be some specialty. These are the best of the best. He said the Navy, the US Navy, also runs on what we call drip tray holders. These are people that have very simple jobs, and basically they're holding the drip tray under the motor or the engine while we're working on it. He said the Navy needs both, absolutely needs both. On a submarine with that level of intelligence and engagement, you have to decentralize. He said you cannot work any other way, but not in every situation. Here's our problem. We've gone to treating this incredible talent pool coming from India as drip tray holders. We need to change that to submariners. We need to, on both sides of the coin, start to thinking about how do we engage that incredible knowledge and passion and talent. So one of the ways we do that is this: deliver teams, not resources. I always balk at the term being used applied to a person as a resource. And I'm going to show you holding up this device. This is a resource, not a person. A resource does not have intrinsic motivation. It cannot handle decentralized decision making. It does not care about customer centricity. It just exists. It just is. A person has all of those things, and we need to take advantage of those. We need to bring that to bear. And not only will it provide better products and services, it also provides a better place to work, more engaged people, people that are happier, people that enjoy their career, that really come to work in the morning excited and thrilled to be there. And even moving beyond that, going beyond a person, delivering a person, but now let's start talking about teams. One of the keys to Scaled Agile is understanding how important it is that an Agile release train is a team of teams. It is a group of people that are working together towards a common goal, a common mission, and then we scale it. That's the power of Scaled Agile, is we can scale that power of a team into a team of teams. And that's where we gain the power. And having those teams that work together for a long period of time, for consistent, that have common goals and learn together. They learn new skill sets, they learn new techniques, they learn new capabilities as they move along, but they're learning as a team. Incredible power in that. I want to show you a quick video here, and I'm briefly going to optimize just to make sure that this plays okay. But it's really showing you the difference between what we call the drip tray holders and the submariners. So some of you may have seen this before, but essentially this is 5 pro football or soccer players, depending on which country or region you come from, against 100 8 and 9-year-old players. So look at the efficiency, the effectiveness of these highly skilled, highly motivated, highly experienced people. Those are the submariners. Those are the people that we need. That's the type of relationship we need from a global outsourcing to working with companies in the Western world and other parts of the world. That is absolutely critical. One more thing I want to point out is, from a practice standpoint, is look at what type of environment you're creating. Again, going back to David Marquet's approach, are you trying to control and attract followers? Does your business model, does your environment, is it based on creating a situation where my goal, my incentive is to attract followers? Or is it about giving control and creating leaders? Again, I've worked with so many people from India, from other countries that have incredible talent, incredible engagement, incredible motivation. And all we need to do is unlock that and give that control and create leaders, create that decentralized decision-making approach. Now, I love this concept here is of the baker and the eater. When we talk about why should we do this, this phrase about eaters and bakers, eaters want a bigger slice of the existing pie. I want more of that pie. Bakers look at it and say, why can't we make a bigger pie? If we make a bigger pie, everyone wins. And that's really the approach here, is if we look at business processing outsourcing, global outsourcing, it's expected to reach $405 billion by 2027. I think the pie is growing. So working together, collaborating, collectively working together with not only with your partner companies, your customers, but also your other partners to implement these concepts where you can start to join the network operating system. You can you can implement decentralized decision-making and intrinsic motivation, 2 key principles from Scaled Agile that really are about the human aspect of what we're trying to do. We are not robots. We are not automatons. We have so much more beyond what that can do. We know we're dealing with AI left and right all the time. What we will probably never have is the emotional side behind it, that energy. One more story I want to leave you with, and I'm sure you're quite familiar with, but is really powerful to me, is the elephant and the rider approach. And now I've never ridden an elephant, but I've been fortunate enough to teach a number of people from India that actually have ridden elephants, so I have verification of this. But when you ride an elephant, from what I've been told, you steer with the ears by directing the ears. The problem is the elephant is a whole lot stronger than you are. So as you're steering the elephant, you might go for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but eventually your arms start to wear out and that elephant says, okay, enough of this. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. I'm going this direction. He can go ahead and pull on my ear. I'm going over there. That internal motivation, that intrinsic motivation, that internal thinking of that passion, that's what we need to engage. That's where the real power is behind this. So with that, I want to turn this over to questions. And again, I want to emphasize that if you have questions about the different approach, the different thinking, I absolutely would love to share my experience, why I'm passionate about this topic, why I think it's so important to address, and just share a few more of the stories that I have heard from my clients when I coach them when they're working with outsourcing situations.
Dwayne, I have a question.
Yes.
So for the agile teams, how much level of transparency it should be there with client in terms of entire development cycle.
Yeah. As much as we
Considering that development team consists of product manager, product scrum teams, and considering every individual parties along with the team.
Yeah, you bring up a really good question, a really good point. This is more than just cultural. This is also protecting your business line. And that's what I'm trying to convey, is that the companies I work with in the US absolutely want transparency. They want to know if there was a mistake made, it's okay. I would rather know about it so that we can work through it, because then we look at it and what does Dean preach? What does W. Edwards Deming preach? It's a systemic problem. The people I work with are very committed, for the most part, that if we have an issue, if there's a deployment problem, if there is a misunderstanding, whatever, exposing that problem, bringing it out will not only allow us to solve the problem, but also solve the underlying systemic problem that caused it. I'll give you an example from David Marquet's book, Turn the Ship Around, that I think is very exemplary. So at one point when David was coming on and taking over the Santa Fe and they were getting it ready for deployment, there was a sailor that made a mistake in the way they tied the ship, the boat, I'm sorry, submarine, the boat, tied the boat off to the pier, made a mistake. And someone almost got hurt. In fact, there was a little bit of an injury. They brought the sailor in before the leadership on the boat. So the captain, the XO, the lieutenants. Everyone expected severe discipline. This is a serious infraction. This is a serious problem. Captain Marquet instead looked at the sailor and said, "Tell me honestly, why did this occur?" And the sailor said, "Well, I know the right practice. I was just in such a hurry to get it done that I didn't follow the right guidelines, the right practice." And Marquet said, "Why not?" "Because I have these other duties." He said, "Aha, we have a systemic problem." He did not discipline the sailor in any way. What they did was attack the system and go fix the system. And again, I want to reinforce and emphasize the people I am working with are ready to do that. From a US-based company working with Indian talent, they are ready to embrace that. Let's attack the system, not the person. Now, tell me if that answers your question, but from a transparency standpoint, that is the key thing, is we cannot address the systemic issues unless we have transparency.
And it answered my question. So just one more question I had to this. So in most of the organization, the product owner is usually would be considered as a face of communication for a company with respect to the customer. So in that case, that transparency factor is mostly depend upon the how product managers is deal with their customers, because most of the time development teams or scrum teams are not exposed to customers. So in that case, the transparency between the development team or scrum teams towards the product manager, and the transparency between the scrum, the product manager to the customer, will that be a different in the entire development journey, or it will be like aligned with that?
Yeah, and we absolutely have to challenge the current paradigm that product ownership and product management is in the Western world and the development is in the Eastern world. We have to absolutely challenge that. Do we always change it? Not necessarily. When we're talking about a product that is designed specifically for a US market, you're probably going to need product ownership, product management that understand the US market, both from a living in it as well as a cultural standpoint. So in that case, a lot of times product ownership, product management makes sense to be US based. That doesn't mean they need to stay in the US. Now, obviously we're traveling right now, but we have an advantage now that product ownership and product management, we've really cut away the boundaries. As Dean and Chris were both saying, we can take advantage of the COVID situation and say, wait a minute, there's a systemic problem of product ownership and product management working together. Here's an opportunity to improve that. And I also want to greatly challenge that concept that always product ownership, product management should be Western based. I disagree with that. Great deal. product ownership, especially in a scaled agile world, because the agile teams are moving so rapidly. In my experience, product owners tend to be more team embedded, team focused. They're still customer centric. They're still working with the customer, working product management, but they have that additional buffer and capability from product management to bring that customer viewpoint. So they're even more embedded with the teams, both because they can and because of the speed of the agile teams. That makes sense to open the doors. Where should we have product ownership? If we have a full team in India, the first thing we should be asking is, why don't we have a product owner in India? And if it's lack of experience, knowledge, we can gain that. We can, you cannot transfer passion and intrinsic motivation, but you can transfer knowledge, subject matter expertise. You can transfer those things. And we should challenge that, again, as a systemic problem.
Hi, Dwayne.
I agree with
Oh, sir. Hi, Dwayne. Shahid here from, I'm actually in Dubai. I was invited very kindly by Cyberbarn. Look, firstly, I just want to say that was a really, really brave topic to talk about, because it can be misconstrued a little bit. And I think the challenge being in Dubai, you know, and having come out of the Western world, having been born and raised in UK and working in Australia, and I think as Scaled Agile have said before, you need to change the system. And I think this issue is being created not from an outsourcing or not from a development, or you take Agile out of this, but we are actually putting people and not recognizing, irrelevant where we're taking them from, on the right level when we kind of consider Maslow's hierarchy. And if you take Dubai, we get a lot of yes men here. Why? Because if you make a mistake, you're out, you lost your visa, your family are going to suffer. I think we've got a general problem here, which only leadership can resolve, which is stop looking at outsourcing as a cheaper way of doing something, because that's the wrong approach to, you know, and this is where we get this development problem versus product owners. I don't think it's a problem of that we don't have the skills of the product owners. I think it's a problem of how we approach this whole context of where do we get resources. And I think the challenge that we see, if we can be open about a topic like this, is people are now comparing, should we go to India? Should we go to Poland? Should we go to Philippines? Where is the cheapest place we can find labor? Right. Now, if that's the motivator to find skills, then you're already causing a problem, because you haven't built quality in, right? As an end customer, you're just looking for the cheapest price, which then drives this problem further and further. So I think whilst the topic was focused on the fact that we're talking about safe in India, and there was an India and US thing where there's some great relationships, you know, people have brought some great skills over. I think that whole system needs to be relooked at if we're ever going to resolve this problem.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that out, because now I can share my selfish reason for addressing this topic. It's a very valuable topic, but my own selfish reasons is the companies I work with in the US, a lot of them still have that belief that it is cheaper. When we show them the data that it is actually not cheaper, it's actually more expensive. The reason for working with talent in other countries such as India is because of the talent, not because of the cost savings, and because of the additional perspective we gain. I have learned so much from working on developing products and solutions and solving problems with people from other culture, where you step back and challenge and your mental model. I like to do this in class a lot, of talking about the mental model that you hold out in front of you. When we start to hold that mental model out in front, and we're no longer challenging the person, but we're challenging that model, that's what we need to do. And when we do that, we recognize that it's not cheaper, but it is absolutely effective when we use it correctly. Again, helping other talent from other areas, other regions, to join that network operating system, to become those agile teams, to be a part of the train. And really the difference, other than they bring a lot of cultural differences and things that are strengths, but really the advantage is they bring that different perspective. We see the customer from a different perspective, which is incredibly valuable. I want to thank everyone for joining, especially the really good questions. And again, I hope you do recognize the passion behind this is that there's some incredible talent on both sides of the ocean. I just want us to use it in the best way we can. Take advantage of that talent while creating a better system for people to enjoy what they do at the same time.